Hello and welcome to Connected Conversations. And I'm happy to have George Matsumoto here again, uh, this time for a functional stream, hopefully. And I am very happy to have him here today. He currently works at the Monterey Bay Aquarium Research Institute as the Senior Education and Research Specialist, and his role involves several different projects: seminar coordinator, summer internship coordinator, distance education, and the links between the Research Institute and other partners. And he is interested in the open ocean and deep sea communities with particular emphasis on invertebrates. So welcome. And is there anything else that you do that I may have missed?
Thank you. That's quite a mouthful. I just realized it's a lot of words all strung together. So some of it may not make sense to people. So if anybody does have questions, feel free to ask.
Yep, please do. That's why he's here. I have, of course, a slew of questions I will ask as well, about you and your work and who you are. And first of all, tell us a little bit about the Monterey Bay area and the aquarium, and so we can get an idea of a perspective of where you are.
Sure. Just to put everything in perspective, I'm on the west coast of North America, California, sort of in the middle. Monterey is about 2 hours south of San Francisco, about 4 hours north of Los Angeles. So we're sort of right in the middle of California. Monterey Bay itself is a beautiful little bay. It's larger than it looks on a map. And the thing that makes it remarkable is that cutting the bay in half is this beautiful submarine canyon that stretches down to 4,000 meters, 2.5 miles down by the time you get about 60 kilometers offshore. And that gives us really easy access to the deep sea, very close to shore.
Wow, so you can look at all kinds of communities within that
We can
area.
look at all kinds of communities, absolutely. And I noticed you've got a scuba mask hanging off of your stand right behind you there. Nice
Yep.
little prop. I'm an avid scuba diver, so I do a lot of scuba diving as well in shallower waters. So we could study kelp forests in shallow waters. If you're interested in sea otters or whales, there's a lot of them in the bay. There's salmon, there's squid, and then when you get into the deeper waters, that to me is where it gets really fascinating, and it's an area that not as much is known about, which doesn't mean we know everything about shallow waters either. A student and I described a beautiful new jelly, a new species of jelly at a very common diving location and swimming location here in Monterey in about 10 feet of water.
Wow.
So there's new things out there. There's undescribed things out there that people may know about. Particularly the indigenous folks are probably well aware, are probably better aware of what lives along our coast than we are.
Wow, and it's you think, and I think a lot of people have this assumption that we already know everything, right? That we kind of like, oh, there's not much left out there, especially, larger, you know, you know, fauna, you think you'd seen everything, but that's really not the case, is it?
It's really not the case. In fact, just in the last 10 years, there's been a new species of whale described. And so whales are not small, right? They're air breathing. They have to come up to the surface. But we don't really spend enough time out on the water to learn enough about whales to know who all the whales are out there either.
Wow, that's amazing. And I think that's something also it's approachable by kids. So you're an educator, so I think everyone at every level is interested in like in whales and even the squishy things, which how you describe them as well. A lot of the invertebrates, and and it's that's really approachable. People love marine life. I think intrinsically. Do you find that like people just have a natural curiosity about it?
I do. There, there, people are really just fascinated about what lives in the ocean. There are certainly those, particularly of my generation, that are afraid of the ocean because there were movies that came out when I was growing up that made people scared to go in the ocean. But in reality, the animals in the ocean really don't want to bother us. They don't want to attack us. And there's a reason why things like shark attacks make the news channel because it is news. It's unusual when that
Hmm.
happens. And so they want to talk about it. If it happened all the time, it wouldn't be news, right? You very
True.
rarely hear about car accidents on the news because they happen all the time. No, nobody really wants to hear about them. So sharks, sharks have gotten a very bad reputation. Shark Week has not helped matters. All the shark horror movies probably don't help very much. But I've been diving with sharks all around the world, all different types of sharks, and I've never been really bothered by sharks at all.
All right. So, true or false? Jellyfish are more dangerous than sharks.
Oh, that's a good question. Um, I'd say you're probably more likely to get injured from a jelly than you are from a shark.
All
And
right.
it's not that the jellies are out after us either. It's just that there's a lot more of them. They live near the surface and their tentacles are just sort of drifting in the water and we run into them and then we get stung.
Yeah, they really have no
So
control. Really, they're just kind of drifting around, especially in the surf. I would imagine.
yeah, they're not really trying to hurt us.
Right. They're not out to get us until I make
No, but
that movie. Then I'll.
there is one really interesting jelly though that I have worked on, and those are the box jellies.
Mhm.
And box jellies to me are fascinating. Box jellies are one of the few jellies that are known to have actually killed humans.
Ooh.
They are when you go to some places like Australia and you see nets out in the water, those aren't there for sharks. Those are there to keep the box jellies out. And
Ah.
the box jellies to me are fascinating because they have image forming eyes. Not two like we have, right? We just have two: lens, retina, and a cornea, just two image forming eyes. They have
Hmm.
eight. What are
Eight.
they doing with eight image forming eyes and nothing that we currently recognize as a brain?
So, what direction do the eyes face? All different direction. I mean, it's symmetrical, right? Has radial
So they're
symmetry,
called box jellies
so it's
because they're
got to
box
be.
shaped,
So there's like
and the
two on
eyes
each
are
side.
yeah, the eyes are in the middle of each side. So there's four sides to a box, and they're in the middle of each side,
Hmm.
and they're angled so that they're really sort of looking forward through the top of the jelly,
So
which
I can.
makes sense because they're transparent.
All right.
And so we think they're hunting for food. And so, and whenever humans get injured by them, of course, they get injured by the tentacles. The tentacles are way behind them,
Hmm.
right? The tentacles
Right.
are draped out behind the jelly. So the jelly may be trying to get away from humans, which in fact they really do. The box jellies don't like shadows, they don't like dark objects.
Hmm.
And I'm thinking it's because they sort of associate dark objects with things they get tangled up with: trees, right? Mangrove roots and pier pilings, and those are all bad things because they could damage a jelly. So when they sense a dark object, they tend to swim away. They tend to swim towards the light, and so they're trying to get away from us. But in doing so, their tentacles are draped out behind them, and then we swim into them.
Oops.
Oops.
And that's a bad day.
That can be a very bad day because the box jelly sting. Some of them are very, very painful.
Wow. So those of you that thought all that netting that was protect you from sharks, you were wrong. It's to protect you from the jellies. As I said, I had heard somewhere that like the jellyfish were more dangerous than the sharks
Yeah.
as far as like your odds of actually encountering one and having a bad day.
Yeah, I would say that's true. Your odds of encountering a jelly are much greater.
Sharks are more able to just swim away from you. You know,
Yes,
they don't want to get near you. You're a
they
stinky
don't want to
human.
bother. They really don't want to bother us.
So, and I have a video here, speaking of jellies, of the bloody belly comb jelly, the deep
Yes.
sea fireball. All right, let me switch over and we'll take a look at that. And all right. So, and this is a quick video. I don't know if you were going to give commentary over the top of it, if there is commentary
Sure,
already.
I can. Yeah, there's some music playing, I think, but
Yep.
I can talk over the music. So this jelly is what we call a comb jelly, and they're very different than the typical jelly that most people think of. For one thing, they have no stinging cells, so
Hmm.
they can't hurt you, which to me made them a fabulous animal to work on for my research because they can't hurt me at all. So I studied this group of animals. They're gorgeous animals. They're the largest animals to be using cilia for their main mode of moving.
Hmm.
Um, they could get very, very large, and the cilia is what you see making that rainbow-like pattern. It's acting like a diffraction grating, or like if you ever held up a CD or a Blu-ray or DVD to the
Hmm.
light, and you sort of angle it. The lines on the back of the Blu-ray will catch the light and break up the white light into all the colors of the rainbow. And that's what these cilia are doing with the white light that we're shining on them. They're actually breaking the white light up into the rainbow, which is what we see when they're swimming around, because we're seeing them by shining a light on them. And this particular one is a deep sea ctenophore, or deep sea comb jelly. They're using that red as camouflage because red light gets absorbed and scattered before you get very deep. By the time you're at 60 feet in the water, 20 meters, you can't see red. It just looks black. And so this is a black comb jelly in a black environment. And so it hides itself very, very well. But it's a brand new family, genus, species that I described a few years ago.
Now, that's interesting about we were talking about that diffraction grating, because that, if I'm correct in my physics, implies that it's at the nanoscale, because that's how you get that iridescence usually
It's
from
pretty
that.
small.
Yeah, because the
Yeah.
cilia are, in fact, extremely small. So, that's fact. I always assumed that it was more of bioluminescence is how they did that, but it's not. That's the cilia. So I learned something
That's
tonight.
There you go. That's
There you
always a good
go.
thing.
Huh. That's very interesting. Now, you said this is like, I would assume this is difficult to study because you have to actually go and see it out in the wild. I mean, or are you
Yes.
successful at bringing these into the lab? Because usually
And,
deep sea things, I understand, do not
and
transport
that's
well.
that's a great story, actually. So this jelly was extremely difficult to study. It is so sensitive to temperature. It likes to live in temperatures that are around 3 degrees Celsius, 4 degrees Celsius, about the temperature of your refrigerator. That's what it likes to live in. If it gets a little bit warmer than that, it dissolves.
Hmm.
And what you're left with is red water, red colored water, because it just disintegrates into nothing. So, this
Huh.
is actually the first animal that I've described where the description is based on still images and video
Hmm.
because we don't have a specimen. It doesn't preserve. So and actually the pictures in the video do a much better job anyway because it wouldn't preserve in very good shape. And so the description of this, the actual specimen jar is a jar of red water in a museum at California Academy of Sciences with a sleeve of photographs next to it. And essentially just says, if you want to see what this used to look like, take a look at the pictures because you can't tell from the jar anymore. So that's kind of interesting. And to me, the really fascinating thing is that this animal, for people who are going to come out and visit California in 2022, uh, is going to be on display at the Monterey Bay Aquarium because they figured out how to keep it alive and how to keep it happy enough to reproduce in captivity.
That's amazing.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah. I mean, it
So, as a
must.
researcher, I couldn't keep it alive long enough to study it on the ship.
Mhm.
The aquarium, they're so good at their job. Their curators, their husbandry staff were able to figure out not only how to keep it alive for long periods of time, but keep it alive and keep it happy enough to reproduce and go through multiple generations. So
Hmm.
now, as a researcher, if I wanted to, I could go down to the aquarium and watch it in the tanks. And so can the public starting next year.
So the public will have just as almost as much access, will have as much access to it research wise as you had before, because they can see it and take pictures of it.
They'll have better access.
Exactly. So
They'll be able to get
I think that's
closer than
kind
I
of,
was.
that's funny that, so you're going to be, of course, there, uh, doing your own research. I'm
I'll
sure.
be there.
Yeah.
I'll definitely be there.
Now, were they able to do this just because they have so much experience with other jellies and raising and rearing
Absolutely.
other jellies? So they kind of
Yeah.
had the know-how.
They had the know-how and they had the time, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
it takes a lot of time to care for these. Like I said, if the water gets a little bit too warm, they disintegrate. So they have to
Mm-hmm.
have somebody there watching the temperature all the time,
All the time.
all the
That's one of those
time.
fun things about biology, everybody. It's a 24/7 job sometimes when you got to get the samples. Now, I also it's they must have found enough of these in the wild, because I'm sure when they tried it, they failed the first time. I doubt they kind of figured it out the first time. Like, hey, we did it. That's great. They must have gone through some trial and error, catching these out in the wild, bringing them in, and seeing what works. I find that interesting as well. That
Yes.
process.
And they use our resources to do the collections. So again, they're our partner institution, so we work with them on exhibits constantly. And we use a variety of different types of research vessels and vehicles to make those collections.
So a lot of these are submersible vehicles. Are these
That's right.
are these vehicles you go in submersibles,
They
or
are
not
not.
not like the Alvin or something crazy like that? These are
They're all remote, so they're all remote control, so that none of them are human occupied.
mhm.
So let me tell you, for those people, and I'm an avid fan of human occupied vehicles. I love human occupied vehicles, and given a choice, I would always volunteer to go in a human occupied vehicle.
Of course you
But
would.
there are issues with human occupied vehicles that they don't tell you about when you're watching some of these TV shows, right? So most of the human occupied vehicle dives are around 12 hours, roughly,
Wow.
right? Plus or minus 4 hours. Um, you're sitting in a chair if you're lucky enough, and to get a front seat. If you're in the back of Alvin, right, you're just lying down in a little tiny sort of rectangle, right? You can't stand up, you can't even crouch, right? The space is really limited. Uh, and you're like that for the entire dive.
Oof.
Now, think about what you as an average person might do during a regular 12-hour period of being awake. There's a number of things that you might need to do. And all of that you have to do without moving because you're sitting in a chair or lying flat in a sub. And if you're in the front in a chair, of course, you're sitting next to a pilot
Mhm.
who's sitting in a chair right next to you.
Hmm.
So there are certain things that one might need to do in terms of biological functions that get difficult in a sub.
Now you really have to be passionate about what you're doing, right, to do that. And that's the thing. Like, someone right now might be watching and being like, you know what? That sounds terrible, but God, that's so cool. I can't wait to do it. Whereas someone
Oh
else
yeah,
is like, there is no way I'm getting in that metal coffin for 12 hours.
and that's me. I would get it in a heartbeat.
Right.
Right? You
And
you do you sort of slow down on your solid food intake for a couple of days before going in. You don't eat
mhm.
very much or drink very much before you go in because
Yeah.
you just don't want to run that risk.
Yeah.
Uh, but
Nope.
and so the advantage of remotely operated vehicles is, of course, you could get up out of the chair and have somebody else sit down, and you could get up and go to the bathroom. You could get up and go to the galley and have a meal. You could get up and go work out on the back deck, right? Because you're tired of sitting in a chair for 2 hours. So remotely operated vehicles makes deep sea exploration a little bit easier.
I would say. My back, physically, I couldn't do it anymore. When I was younger, I probably could do it, but um, my back I can barely sit for 2 hours now without, having to get up and move around. So 12 hours in a submersible. Whew. No, that's rough. And in being that we are on Twitch and people on this platform play lots of video games, I'm sure many of them would be much more in tune to just sitting at the computer and operating the vehicle remotely, with a joystick even.
Yes, and for all of you out there who are really good at video games, right? Good at mastering being in a three-dimensional environment while you're only looking at a two-dimensional environment, which is essentially what video games are. If you're good at that, there's a potential career in remotely operated vehicle operations, right? Being a pilot, because that's the skill you need. I will tell you though, the other skill you need is engineering,
Mm.
because the pilots are also the people who fix the remotely operated vehicle when something goes wrong. So our pilots are either electrical engineers, mechanical engineers, or software engineers, because those are the things that can go wrong with a remotely operated vehicle:
The engineering
mechanical,
trifecta.
electrical, or software. Yeah.
Okay.
You don't have to do all three because you'll have more than, we usually take out 5 pilots with us
Mm-hmm.
because they don't like to sit in a chair for 2 hours at a time either. So they usually rotate through and take shifts.
And I would assume something always goes wrong, because with mechanical things in that kind of environment, there's
I, I,
so many moving parts and so many possibilities that.
I would say our Embari has an extremely good success rate with our
Okay,
dives. We do
good.
not lose very many dives due to engineering issues. And part of that is because we do have a specific number of days set aside for maintenance,
Right.
where we might take the vehicle out of commission for a week so we could sort of take it apart and give it a tune-up, right? Or upgrade the latest software and check it out before we go do anything else. So that's important to be able to do that.
Yep, that is really good. And one thing that I've been talking to a lot of people about this year that are in science and is the importance of that engineering design component in science education, but also that software you mentioned, the programming, and how important that is, as well. So,
Absolutely. So
so
I
you would
mean,
agree
I
with
was
that?
I was really happy to see engineering sort of be this overarching stream throughout all of the national science education standards, because it's important. It's integrated. It's part of science. Engineering is really important. But the idea of programming, learning how to program, is becoming, well, it is really important right now. And as far as I could see, it's going to become more important in the future.
Mm-hmm.
Everything we're doing, everything we're using, everything we're building requires programming. And if you have the ability to do some of that programming yourself, you make yourself much more marketable, right? Because then you don't have to hire
Mm-hmm.
somebody to do the program for you. So programming is a great skill. And if you're a student right now wondering what programming class you should take, it doesn't really matter that much. Learn how to program. The basics of programming are not changing. The languages change. Whatever
Mm-hmm.
language you learn now may not exist in 10 years because the languages are changing very fast. But the mechanics of programming don't change. So whatever you learn now is going to be useful to you.
You heard it, kids. That's it.
Yeah, I will say that the type of programming that I learned was not very useful to me because I'm old enough that I learned programming using punch cards. And what that meant is that instead of writing code, you punched an index card with the code on it, and then you stacked up all your cards and ran them through the machine, and that's how you tested your code. And so if you got something wrong, you had to pull out all your cards and figure out which card had the wrong code on it. Oh, it was terrible. And the worst thing would be is if you were walking and you tripped and all the cards fell because now they're
No.
all out of order. Yeah. I'll,
So,
I'll, 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 I'll be an old guy and I'll just say, boy, you young kids have it easy now.
so Natty Science, who's a biochemist, says, I'm surrounded by people who can program while I can't much, and it definitely seems so helpful.
Yeah. Likewise, I'm surrounded by people who could program. And at this point in my career, I think it's easier for me to surround myself with really bright, intelligent people and tell them what I would like them to do than to try to learn it myself right now. Although I am trying to learn R because R seems to be one of these useful programming languages that might make my life a little simpler.
Okay. There's always time to learn.
There's
Um,
always time to learn.
like I say, I didn't learn my first programming till I taught a class where we did some programming, and that was 5 years ago, 6 years ago. So in my late 30s
Yeah.
was when I did my first programming. So, uh, and I got pretty good at it. I did JavaScript. So,
Yeah, it's fun, and even if your students want to play around with
hmm
Arduino controllers, just
yep,
to learn how to control things. They could build controllers to do things around the house, right? Control Bluetooth or cameras or little radio cars or whatever it is. So I think there's a lot of opportunity for that. So uh, keep an eye out and take advantage of opportunities. Learning how to solder, right? Learning how to use a soldering iron, I think is a great skill. Right?
yep.
Imagine all the things you could fix around the house that you otherwise might have to throw out um, because it's just a broken wire.
We have a question from Mario, the science guy, and he asks, are bacteria as prevalent within oceanic life as they are in terrestrial organisms?
Absolutely. And not only in life, but also on the sea floor and in the water itself. So the ocean water is filled with bacteria and viruses. I mean, it's chock full, which does not mean you have to go gargle with mouthwash if you go to the ocean and swallow seawater. It's just what it is, and a lot of the bacteria that are in the ocean and in oceanic animals, and even deep in ocean rock, we're finding bacteria. A lot of these cannot be cultured, and so we
Hmm.
don't know very much about a lot of these bacteria either.
Yeah. We basically, bacteria cover the planet and they're everywhere. Yeah.
I would say that's probably pretty accurate.
Yeah. In the sky, in volcanoes, almost, those extremophiles. Yep. Oh, yeah. And Natty Science says there's so many mechanical skills you can get just by in your lab just fixing things. I would say
Yeah,
that's
when
true.
when when we think about modern life today, I'm really disappointed at how disposable everything is, and how quickly we are to throw things out and buy a new one because it's cheaper. It's cheaper than getting it fixed, and so I strongly recommend that students play around with fixing things. Right? If a toaster doesn't work, take it apart, see if you can figure out why it doesn't work. Hopefully, with some adult supervision, because it obviously does involve some electricity. Um, but learning how to fix things, I think, is a great skill to have.
I think that's especially true in field science, right? So if you're out at sea, right, you can't go to a Walmart or order from Amazon and get it the next day, right? You if you're in the deep woods researching, bears or trees, you, you're not going to be able to go someplace and just get a new one. You got to be able to fix what you have, hopefully, uh, to make it work.
Absolutely, and thinking about that, there are times when we've been out at sea and we've been trying to figure out uh, how to collect a certain animal, and And I'm trying to show you let's see. Oh, there we go. So here is, I'm going to share it to you in the chat. So maybe you could share with somebody. And this is not our footage. This is from Nautilus Live, which
Okay.
is Bob Ballard's ocean discovery research vessel. But this is a beautiful sea anemone. And we call it the pom-pom sea anemone because it looks like a pom-pom, right? It looks like a cheerleader's pom-pom. And we also call it the tumbleweed sea anemone because it seems to roll around the ocean floor like a tumbleweed does on land. And that's kind of fascinating. But it's fragile. And so picking something like this up is really difficult. And again, we were out with the aquarium one day, and the aquarium wanted to try to keep one of these alive in their tanks because they're a gorgeous animal. And it's a sea anemone, right? You could feed it squid, you could feed it fish. And they had to do some troubleshooting because they were out at sea. So the way they figured out to collect this was they went into the galley and they found a colander, right? One of these large sieves that you use to, wash your lettuce in. And we brought the remote vehicle up. We attached the colander to the arm, and then we sent it back down with the colander, and we used the colander to scoop up the sea anemone and put it in our drawer. And it worked beautifully.
Problem
right?
solving.
Nothing expensive, right? All we did
Right.
is make it harder to rinse our lettuce, right? Because now we had a new ocean tool, an ocean collection tool that was no longer going to be in the galley.
The other amazing thing is how well you said anemone without even like.
Tongue twister. Well, it's about 50-50. Sometimes I get it and sometimes I don't.
Yeah. So Stacy, who's in chat, said her students couldn't believe that, or her students couldn't believe that when a scientist broke their sunglasses in Antarctica, they just couldn't go out and get new ones.
That's right.
I mean, come on.
And so, if I was out in that position, what I would probably do is use the old style of sunglasses, right? What they used to use before sunglasses were invented. And that's just these little tiny slits, right? You just build a pair of some sort of protection that just leaves a little tiny slit open that you could see through, but is not going to be enough to let enough radiation in to damage your eyes. I don't know if that's what they built, but that's what I would have done.
Or just paint your glasses, but then you might be blind. You might not be able to see through them.
Well, yeah. I mean, if it's truly a good, diverse group down in out in the field, hopefully there's somebody out there with some lightly colored nail polish.
Yep.
Right, which would work great just to sort of give a little tint to your eyeglasses, and generate some extra protection that way.
So another question here. What is the most common problem you encounter during sea trips in general?
Personally, probably my most common problem is seasickness. Like most other people I know who study the ocean, I get seasick. And it's something, if you spend enough time at sea, you do develop your sea legs, so to speak. You get used to the sort of the rock and the roll of the ship. But if you're just going out for the day, it's hard to get used to it. And a lot of our trips are day trips. We leave the dock at 7 a.m. and we're back at the dock by 4:30 in the afternoon. So we're just out for the day. So it's something that, again, you get over the difficulties because you find what you're doing to be fascinating enough that it's worth the effort.
Yep. Now you mentioned that I did have David Trossman, who's an oceanographer, on this chat earlier this year, and he had never been to the ocean when he was an oceanographer because he just takes the data that NOAA and other organizations generate, and he's in the middle of the US and he just processes that data to research climate change. So there are people that research the ocean that have never been on the ocean. So,
Absolutely. But I'll bet you if you talk to him, you'll find out that he goes to ocean related meetings.
oh yeah.
And I will say that ocean meetings are very often in really nice places. So the next Ocean Sciences meeting, which will be in February of 2022, is in Honolulu.
Okay. Well, I
So if
know,
you're an ocean scientist in the middle of the US and you wanted to go to a meeting to share all your ocean work, well, you have to go to Honolulu.
horrible. I'm going to find a teaching conference in Honolulu and I'll,
They happen.
oh, I'm sure
I
they
had
do.
a teachers conference in Honolulu.
I've yet to get out there. I have never been out, that direction. I've only been to California twice. So that's as far west as I'd been.
Excellent. Well, you have to talk to
Yeah.
Stacy about our teacher workshops that I run.
Yep. I will.
So our next one will be in 2022 in Seattle.
Ooh, Seattle.
And 2023, it looks like will be in Honolulu.
Okay. 2023. Got it.
Yeah.
Mark that down. I'll skip to
And we
Seattle and go
cover
straight to
we
Honolulu.
cover all expenses. So
Honolulu. All right. Got it.
talk to Stacy about how to get in.
I've been to some of her talks about it already. So
Yeah.
I already got the gist of it. So
I see Mario is talking about having a meeting on a cruise boat. And believe it or not, Mario, it's been done. So the Coral Reef Society had their Coral Reef meeting on a cruise ship as it sort of meandered around some of the coral reefs in the United States Virgin Islands.
huh,
I understand. I didn't go to that because I'm not a coral reef scientist, but I understand that was a very, very popular meeting.
I'm sure. I'm sure. Um, so I mean, I've been on vessels before. I just don't. I'm just the seasickness thing, like you said, getting over that is tough. Uh, I recall the one time I was on the replica ship Half Moon is what I sailed on for a while. It's a square rig vessel that Henry Hudson sailed on up the Hudson. So I'm with a bunch of students and we're going out the Verrazano Narrows.
Yep.
And you're going from basically nice flat water to ocean water. And no sooner did we hit that ocean water that everyone except the captain started getting sick, of course.
Yeah.
Captain Chip, he was loving it. He's like, "This is great. We're having a great time." Everyone else is like, "Whoa, God, can
Well,
we go
that's
back?"
the worst time, of course, because you're going against the waves,
Oh,
right? So
God.
you're going up and down, and the captain being the captain is probably not making it any easier by going at a diagonal. He's probably going straight into it, right? So the ship can go all the way up and down and really give you the full experience.
Oh,
'Cause
yeah. Oh, yeah.
that's what a ship
I can
captain
think
would
about
like.
it now and I'm like, I could laugh about it. But at the time, it was, it was miserable.
There are some very effective remedies. A lot of people that I work with swear by the pressure bands,
Hmm.
and they say that works extremely well. Uh, I try the scopolamine patches that you put behind your ear are fabulous, except that I'm allergic to them, so I can't use them. And so I use the Coast Guard cocktail, which is what the Coast Guard prescribes for their sailors who have to go out in awful
Mm-hmm.
conditions. And that's a mixture of two different medications. One's a prescription and one's over the counter.
Okay. I tried ginger, which is supposed to work. So
Yeah, some
I
people
just
do
brought a
ginger.
chunk of ginger with me on one trip, and I just, if I knew it was going to get rough, I just take off a chunk and
Ah,
put it in some tea, or if I had some tea, or just,
ginger snaps. Ginger
yep,
snaps work well because you need something in your stomach.
yep, and did that. It seemed to help. I don't know if it was just like the impact of the flavor, just like distracted my senses, or if it actually worked in the long term. It worked just as good as any other remedy, I thought. So, But yeah, so that I think a lot of people are dissuaded from doing that kind of field research. But I don't think that should stop you. Most people I know that have done that kind of thing have come out on the other end glad that they did it.
Yeah.
Even though they did have that that experience that was not so great, but everyone, they got through it on the other end and enjoyed it. So wonderful, great questions, everybody. Great questions. Now I have this other video that I'll switch to that you have queued up, since we don't have any other questions at this very moment. And this is about kind of it's a 6-minute video kind of about where you work, correct?
Yes. It's
All
all
right.
about MBARI, the Research Institute.
In 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 1,200 meters.
Everything in the ocean has a story to tell. It's huge, it's dark, it's cold. How do you access this space? Simply by having a presence, you see things that no one has ever seen before. You discover animals that are completely new to science, or phenomenon that no one knew was occurring.
You periodically come across something that is so magnificent that you didn't expect to see, and it's just breathtaking.
Tomorrow the winds will blow, they'll pump nutrients to the surface, and everything about the system will change. Where things are, who's there, how fast they're growing.
We're in a position to be able to share our discoveries and our love of the ocean in ways that were never possible before.
There are no departments of chemistry or biology or engineering for that matter. We are all mixed together, and that's very unique.
Each side can inspire the other to ask challenging questions and come up with innovative answers.
A scientist will know what they're looking for, but the engineer can illustrate the possibilities beyond what the scientist first imagined.
And that's the trick, is understanding those differences in language and how we put them together in order to realize the kind of device that we're trying to build. We marry that science and engineering partnership with our marine operations personnel. And the only way to make all that work is to have a group of dedicated professionals to operate the vessels, to operate the equipment, to recover it. It's really that three-legged stool, science, engineering, operations, that allow us to do the things that we do and work as a team. Oceanography is a contact sport. We have to not only immerse ourselves in that realm, but we also have to acquire material. We have to manipulate that material.
MBARI's here in Moss Landing because of the access to deep water that we can get to so quickly.
If we were to drain Monterey Bay, you would see a canyon equivalent size to the Grand Canyon.
So we get these deep, cold, nutrient-rich waters fertilizing the upper ocean. It gives us an incredible opportunity to understand that connection of the deep sea to our coastlines where most of our fisheries come from.
One of MBARI's guiding principles is to make our measurements in the natural habitat rather than hauling the animals out and studying them in our world.
It's important that discoveries we make have an impact and tackle problems like climate change, like ocean acidification, and exporting that knowledge, making it available to the whole world. One of the really unique things about MBARI is our partnership with the Monterey Bay Aquarium. We have the opportunity to bring fundamental science and technology and marry that with their amazing global reach that communicates important issues about the ocean to the public, to policymakers. We really want to be transformational as opposed to just incremental in the work we do.
Oceanography is in the middle of a robot revolution with platforms that can take us to places we couldn't be, at times we couldn't be there. It's really a fundamental shift in how we think about things.
We have new ways of assessing fisheries, better ways of managing precious resources. We're sitting on this mountain of highly curated information here that was being mined to extract quantitative information like who's there, how many, how do they relate to changes in the environment, and so forth.
And that gives us an incredible ability to think about these things at a grand scale and to make those connections that are really challenging, but that's what we need to do.
Just by studying anything in the ocean, you are studying climate change.
The ocean is absorbing a tremendous amount of carbon dioxide and absorbing a lot of the heat that's being produced. And the question is, what does that mean for the ocean? What does it mean for the life that depends on the ocean? And what are the consequences in the future?
How changes at one step have implications through the entire ocean food web and atoms to ecosystems, and all the way up to humans on Earth.
I don't know anywhere in the world where you have this confluence of the place of Monterey Bay, the opportunity of science-engineering partnership, and the charge to do something that's high risk, long duration, unknown outcomes, and at the end of that, the expectation that you will just share it with everyone. You will essentially give it away.
Every time we answer a question, we have 20 new ones. Often we think we know what's happening, and then the biology surprises us.
It's really amazing how much MBARI has been able to be the ambassador for the open ocean and the deep sea.
That's why MBARI is here. We're supposed to do things that might not be possible by any other approach. I don't imagine there's another place quite like it.
So now you get a sense of
Climate change.
why I'm having so
ocean
much
is
fun on my
absorbing
job.
Yep.
It's to me, if I'm talking to students, and I would say if you're lucky enough to get a job like I have, one that you love, one that you don't mind getting up to go to work, then I think you're lucky. Because I think I'm lucky. I'm very fortunate to be able to be doing what I do, and where I'm doing it, and with the people I'm doing it with. I just consider myself very, very fortunate.
And that's like the key to like life and career, right? You find what you love and you do it because you enjoy it.
That's right. Right. You
Awesome.
don't, you could also work for a paycheck and, put in your 20, 30, 40 years and retire with a pension. That's another way to do it. But for me, life is a little too short to try to do something that is a job. This to me is something I love to do.
Awesome. Hence why you're still doing it. I have some questions about climate change on a more serious note, but this thing is so dang cute.
Yeah, he is a little cute. So this is actually an undescribed species of a deep sea octopus, and it is currently being worked on. The description is being worked on by an intern, somebody who was an intern at MBARI, and then went on and became a research associate at MBARI, got her PhD from UC Berkeley and became a postdoctoral fellow for the Monterey Bay Aquarium and is now working at the Smithsonian. But she's working on the description right now. And if students are out there, if you're a college student, MBARI has an internship program, a summer internship program. You could come and work with us for 10 weeks in the summer and we do almost everything: science, engineering, science communication, you name it. We've got different projects. So check us out online on our website.
Awesome. Now, questions about climate change, and if you don't know the answers, it's okay. But I was just curious. The ocean is absorbing heat and carbon dioxide. How much more heat and carbon dioxide can the ocean absorb till crisis mode?
The tipping point. Where's the spot where it gets so far that we can't recover? That's an area of debate.
Mhm.
Where the problem is that there's a delay period set up, and so we are getting warmer. The ocean's getting warmer. And we're putting more and more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, even if we were to stop all carbon dioxide emissions right now, I mean, just stop totally around the world, no more fossil fuels. We're still looking at probably 15 to 20 years of buildup um, in the ocean. The ocean's not going to respond that quickly. It takes a
Hmm.
while. So it's going to continue getting warmer. The climate's going to continue changing uh, for a little while to come. And this is part of the reason why changing what we do to try to counter climate change is difficult, because what we do now is not going to have an immediate impact. It's going to be an impact 10 years down the road, 15 years down the road. And it's hard to get motivated about changing something when we don't see the results right away. But the longer we delay, the worse it's going to become. So where's the tipping point? It's hard to say.
But
We
there
don't
is
know yet.
one. I think the
There
key
there
is,
will be one, right?
Mhm.
Definitely. Sooner or later we're going to lose something in the ocean that is critical. And like I said, we don't know enough about the ocean to know when that tipping point is going to happen. We don't know what's going to go away that's going to be so bad that everything else in the ocean is going to crash.
Right. When that first fishery, collapses and an entire food source for one animal and then another animal and then another animal is gone.
Yeah. Well, ocean acidification is a great
Yes.
example. I mean, pulling elements out of the ocean to make your skeletons, whether it's your external skeleton, exoskeleton, or your internal skeleton, your endoskeleton, all these animals are pulling things out of the ocean to make their skeletons. And as the chemistry changes, that's going to get harder and harder. So think about an ocean where there's nothing with a skeleton, external or internal, right? Because the chemistry's changed.
We still have
That doesn't leave
bacteria.
that doesn't leave a lot of life, right? And even my animals, the jellies, they have little calcium carbonate balance organs inside
Mhm.
of them, so they know which way is up. If they can't build those, they can't swim. And so, will the future ocean be bacteria and viruses? It's possible, right? Maybe
Mhm.
maybe seaweeds, algae. Algae
Mhm.
might do well. Seagrasses are probably going to do very, very well with ocean that's a little bit more acidic and has a little bit more carbon dioxide in it. Seagrasses are actually flowering plants. They're true angiosperms. They're the marine angiosperms. So it's an unusual flowering plant. Um, and in an acidic ocean, all the things that like to munch and nibble on seagrasses don't survive.
Mm.
And so some of the healthiest seagrass beds are areas where we've got carbon dioxide bubbling up naturally from the ocean floor. And there's some bays in Italy where that's happening, where we've got carbon dioxide super saturating the ocean, and seagrasses are doing great.
Really interesting. And so at the Institute, is I mean, there must be an emphasis on climate change and climate research. And in the video, it alluded to like every piece of research we do now is, climate research. It sounds kind of like a bold statement, but there is truth to that.
Absolutely. And, for the deep sea, some people were thinking that the deep sea might be protected from the effects of climate change, but we know that's not true. Right. So
Mhm.
and the problem with the deep sea is that they're much less tolerant of change because things have been so stable in that environment for so long that when things change, like my red comb jelly, right, the temperature gets a little warm, it dissolves. That's not good, right? Because the ocean's warming. Um, and as pH changes, we know that things in the deep sea are going to be affected too. But these are all experiments we're working on. We're working on ocean acoustics
Mhm.
because as the pH changes, it turns out sound travels faster. pH is in the sound equation for how fast sound travels in the ocean. pH is one of the variables, which is really interesting,
That is
right?
really interesting. I'm trying to think about why that is.
So as the pH drops, as the ocean becomes more acidic, sound travels faster. What does that mean? Well, we already know the ocean's getting noisier, right? Humans are making a lot of noise in the ocean with ship traffic, etc. If sound can travel further,
Huh.
that may have even a greater impact on all the things that live in the ocean that depend on sound. So these are all active areas of research at MBARI.
I'm gonna have to look into that. Acidity and sound. On the surface, it sounds completely ridiculous. You know,
Yes.
how is there a correlation? You know, why would that? So, Natty Science, I would love to do something like this, but the publish or perish and constant grant writing really makes me not want to go into academia. How do nonprofit research centers like this differ from universities?
That is a great question. And so MBARI is unique. We are a nonprofit research center funded primarily by another nonprofit, the David and Lucille Packard Foundation. That level of funding that we get from the David and Lucille Packard Foundation enables us, as that last video showed, enables us to take long-term, high-risk projects and make them reality, because we're not faced with the publish or perish paradigm. We're not expected to do short-term, likely to succeed projects, because everybody could do those. And MBARI does the other ones, the hard ones, the ones that might not work. But if they work, they're going to be great results. That's what we like to do.
Yeah, and I've looking into a lot of different scientists and where they work this year. I notice a lot of people will go from university either after a master's or even after a bachelor's or even PhD and work in a nonprofit, either museums or, places like that, as, to get that experience. So maybe, Natty Science, you want to try an internship, over the summer and see how you like it, more or less than, academia in the universities.
Yeah, and every center is a little bit different. So that one of the ones that has a lot of recognition is, for instance, Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution, right, which is affiliated with an academic institution, but most of the staff there are what we call soft salaries. In other words, their salaries depend on research grants, which means they have to publish. So it's a matter of finding the right fit for what you want to do. It doesn't mean that we don't write proposals at MBARI. In fact, I'm in the midst of writing proposals right now. What it means is that for MBARI, all our proposals are mostly internal. We write them to ourselves, and we decide what gets funded. And if you're smart and you've been around long enough, you only write proposals that are likely to be funded.
So you already have that experience, what they like.
Which makes life much easier, right? So if you're writing proposals to the National Science Foundation, you may be looking at 2% funding success. So if you wrote 100 proposals and you got 2 funded, you're average. Right? It is really hard to get research funding right now. Absolutely.
Wow. Well, glad we gave you something to think about, Natty Science. That'll and don't dismiss public school teaching yet either. That's always an option as well.
And Stacy just posted a comment about our Adopt a Float program, which is a great reminder. We do have an Adopt a Float program where students, classes, after-school programs, whatever, teachers can adopt one of our profiling floats. It's a biogeochemical float that we throw into the ocean. It drifts around the ocean for around 5 years. And every 10 days, it goes to 2,000 meters, profiles the water column from 2,000 meters to the surface, and sends the data back to us. And we post it online. And if you adopt a float, that name goes into the database. And so you become part of the scientific database. And so you could find that. I'll
I'm Googling it
get the
right now.
link. Okay, good. Yeah. And so it's a really simple form to fill out online. There's some rules you have to follow with regard to figuring out the name you want to give your float. Can't be a copyrighted name because we don't have copyright approvals.
There we go.
Yeah.
And that's it right there.
That's it. Yeah. We made a new website and it links to it, I think, somewhere. But
Okay.
if you go to Ambari's webpage, you could find it.
Cool.
But I've got 100 floats I need to get adopted this year. So somebody adopt a float.
I just might do that. One of my summer
That'd be great.
projects.
And then your class can follow it.
Yep. We'll adopt it. I will probably be teaching biology lab this year. So,
Oh, that's great.
so that'll
And
be,
just in case you were wondering about how to get involved with our teacher workshops that we run in places like Seattle and Honolulu, working with the floats is a good way.
yep. I see that link on here as well for educational resources. Like, very, very cool. Very nice. Back to this cute guy here. So now we're gonna take a little, we're gonna see if there's any questions first. The resources are great on the site. Well, I'm glad you liked that. Yeah.
Thank you, Stacy.
Thank you. One of your biggest advocates there for Ambari.
Oh, Stacy's great.
So this is Twitch, so we play games, and so we're going to play a game now. And we know that you love your gelatinous creatures. So I was wondering how much you know about other gelatinous things, like Jello. So if you answered 2 out of these 3 questions correctly about this famous food, someone in the chat will be gifted a sub. So, are you ready? I got 3 questions for you.
I'm ready.
Jello. Your favorite squishiness. Not. Which quintessential Hollywood movie featured Jello? Was it A, The 10 Commandments, where Moses parted a sea of Jello? Was it B, where in Raiders of the Lost Ark, where the melting Jello was used in the eyes during that famous "Miriam, don't look at the ark" scene? Or was it in C, in The Godfather, in which a bowl of the cubed jiggly stuff was seen on the table with Al Pacino and Diane Keaton?
Wow.
So which of those movies? The 10 Commandments, Raiders of the Lost Ark, or The Godfather?
That's a tough one. I'm going to guess B.
B is incorrect. It was A, The 10 Commandments.
10 Commandments.
And the scene with the parting the sea, it was achieved by using a large dunk tanks that were flooded with Jello. And then the film was shown in reverse to achieve the illusion of the sea being parted.
Oh, darn, that's a lot of Jello.
Yeah, so there was some movie trickery there, obviously, as well. But yeah, that was a lot of Jello. Okay, that's only one though. You still have 2 questions. All right.
Okay.
Question 2 about Jello. What was scientifically shown to be true about Jello? A, Jello can survive and still be edible after 1 week in suborbital flight. Just out there floating around. B, an EEG showed that Jello emits the same brain waves as an adult human. Or C, a recent study showed that Jello can act as a substitute for cortisone shots to relieve joint pain.
You're not making this easy for me.
No, I got some tough ones this week.
Boy.
You can ask chat for help too. I don't know if they know anything more than you do.
I'm going to say A just because I'm hoping that B and C are incorrect.
The answer is actually B.
Really?
Jello emits an EEG that has the same as an adult human.
It's just sugar, gelatin, and water. There's no.
So is your brain.
There's no electrical impulses in there.
I
know, but if the brain's not alive, it doesn't have an EEG. It's a flat line.
You would think, but that's not the case, I guess.
No,
it was an actual. You have to look that up. You can look it up. I'm telling you, I found it on the internet. It's got to be true.
But don't you think that Jello would also be edible if it went up into some?
I think so, but that was not actually a study done. So that was not published. So someone could do that research still.
Ah, I see. Okay.
And see if you can have Jello orbit.
Oh, I fear I'm failing.
All right, last one. You can redeem yourself with this one. What honor has been bestowed upon Jello? Was it A, declared the official state snack of Utah in 2001? B, Jello received the OSHM, or Outstanding Service in Hospital Medicine Award, in 1993 for service to the hospital industry and patients. Or C, it was declared the world's most adaptable food by the WHO for its ability to hold all other kinds of food in 1985.
Boy, I believe all three. I think it's such a versatile food.
They're so plausible, aren't they?
All three. Well, let's see. So who's got the greatest sense of humor? I'm going to say B.
It was actually A. You guessed A for the other two. This time it was actually A. I was like, choose A again.
I haven't tried B yet, so I'm going to go for B.
It's the official state snack of Utah. Really? So Utah, if you live there, congratulations. You have an official state snack that no one wants to eat.
I'm 0 for 3. I don't even, given the use of alcohol with Jello, I'm very surprised that Utah would call it the official state snack.
I think that's the only form of Jello most of us have had. When it's mixed with the vodka or the Everclear. So that's pretty funny.
A total failure on my part. I apologize to the people in the chat because you win nothing.
I should give it to him anyways. It is the last, those were tough questions. I came up with those. I'm like, oof, these are kind of tough. So yeah, those are tough. These are some of the tougher questions I have done. So, but you managed to flop on all three of them though. I could have sworn.
I did. That's pretty good.
I did get that. Natty's been to a bunch of these chats. He knows that those are pretty tough. Usually I give you a couple gimmies in there. But Jello was so easy to make questions about though. I think I'm just getting better at making questions too after doing this for a year.
Jello's a good one. I'm glad you didn't ask me like how many flavors there are, because I don't even know how many flavors there are of Jello.
There's innumerable. I don't know if you could count the number of flavors. Right? I don't know if that's a possibility. Because you can take anything, make it a flavor.
Well, this is true.
So the spinach. There you go. Exactly who we wanted to go to.
There you go.
Congratulations, Serene Sai Stacy. You have to stop by on Fridays when we play Below Zero. It's a Subnautica game. It's where you explore an alien underwater ecosystem. It's fantastic.
Well, that sounds like fun.
It is. So it's a great game. So I also have some other games. This what I'm doing this summer is, since I'm doing these chats, I'm going to be, and this is a big, promo for the channel. I'm going to be going through science-themed video games and their use in the classroom. So I have a bunch of
nice.
games that we'll go through and look at that pertain to science.
Do you do any VR?
I have. And there is one VR game I streamed once, but there are a few more I want to stream as well. And actually, where I put my computer now, I moved to the basement. I have a nice area for VR, so it actually to play. So I'm going to delve back into that. But streaming VR, I mean, it's hard to stream just two-dimensional. Streaming VR is extremely challenging. Kudos to anyone that has figured it out and can do it. So, oh, you just received your VR goggles for the classroom. Very nice. Very nice. Now, what kind of VR goggles are they, Stacy? I'm curious. Oh, by the way, and PlayStation's coming out with a new set of VR goggles this summer at some point. So,
well, sure. VR will be one of our topics for our teacher workshop as well.
Ooh, interesting.
So I'm very interested in how VR works in the classroom.
Let me see if I can find this video. Someone shared. One of my other guests shared this video with me. Where there was
last week I was using VR goggles to fly one of our remotely operated vehicles.
Oh, there you go.
And it turns out that with VR goggles, I'm a pretty good pilot. Not as good without the goggles.
Yep. The problem with VR is you have a motion sickness problem still. Like, I'm good for, about, depending on what I'm doing, about a half an hour or so. And then it's kind of like, I can't imagine, like, some people will stream on Twitch for 24-hour streams. That's not happening with VR. I don't know how you could do that without yakking, or you take them off and immediately you're back in reality and you get sick.
Well, what you do is you do it over telepresence. So if you're on shore and you've got a satellite feed to your ship, you could fly the vehicle in VR and not be on the ship.
Yep.
So that's something we're playing around with a little bit now. And I just put a link in the chat, not the radio one, but the one below that, for anybody listening that wants to take a look at some of the research we're doing at Mbari. We're doing a live stream next week, Wednesday, June 30th at 11 o'clock Pacific time. And if you follow Mbari on YouTube and subscribe and ask for notifications, you'll get a link when we go live. And so this will be a live broadcast from a location called Sur Ridge off the California coast. We're going to be discussing not only Sur Ridge, but also things like climate change, careers. We're going to be chatting with one of our remotely operated vehicle pilots. We're going to be talking to somebody from the Monterey Bay Aquarium. It's going to be a nice day, a nice hour. So if you can, check us out. And there's Scott just posted a link to a radio broadcast too. So right before I did this, I was in Carmel, which is about 20 minutes away, doing a radio plug for the live show. So you could hear me talk a little bit about Mbari and the live show in the first 20 minutes of the broadcast.
Yep. Now I'm looking at the class VR thing that Stacy was talking about. I have brought my my Oculus into class. I did that.
Oh, okay. And
of course,
you hooked it up to a screen so the class can see what you're doing?
I had it as part of like stations. So one of the stations they could do, because it was my personal one, they could put it on, and we were doing caves. It was an earth science lab, so they could there's a small like cave that they could explore through. So which I thought like just looking at pictures of caves, that's just not the same as being in one, right? So I think the same thing with being like underwater, like snorkeling, it's the same thing. It's not, you know, being underneath the water is, you know, I don't know. It doesn't do it justice when you can't actually like look in 3 dimensions around you to see what's going on,
Yeah.
get that perspective. So,
Okay. Wow.
but yeah, that is the future of so much is VR. I actually had one of the
I
other
think there's a great
guests.
deal of potential. So
Yep.
we'll be giving away some Oculus goggles for the next workshop.
Oof. Now the problem with Oculus right now
It's
is
linked to Facebook.
linked to Facebook, and a lot of schools that have gotten Oculus goggles can't make
Yep.
Facebook accounts so that they work. Personally, I think that Facebook is like an Oculus. They're missing a huge opportunity when it comes to education.
It's been pointed out to them.
And
for some
I don't know if they
reason
just
they're
don't
not-
give a crap. Someone else is going to come along and
Yeah.
do it better than there if they don't take advantage of it. So I don't know what their deal is. So it's
Yeah.
kind of frustrating because they have one of the biggest libraries now.
I've talked to them and they don't get it. They're just not making that move. I don't understand it.
Yeah, I don't either. But I think anything that'll connect to like even, I don't know, there's so many, there's, I don't know, VR right now is fine. I'd like to know Stacy's experience with the VR. I mean, Google VR is okay, but it just doesn't have the library and it doesn't have the, I don't know. It's just not as good as the stuff you can get on Steam, you know, or on Oculus. That stuff is, some of it's really high quality.
Yeah.
Even
So now you can link your Oculus up to Steam too, you know.
Oh yeah, I did that.
Yeah.
Oh, I did that.
My son did that and he wrote out all the instructions for me, but I haven't tried it yet.
That was a project a couple summers ago where I had to figure that out because there were a lot of steps at that point. At least I think they've made it a little bit easier to do it. But Stacy, if you're trying to put I don't know what you're trying to say there. If you have a link, you can put it and get it to me on Twitter and I can take it from there. If you want to share a link or something. But yeah, that was a project. That's a technological crazy land trying to like get the right chords and put it in the right spot. Then you have to change the settings into one thing then to change the settings in the other. But once it all works, it's fabulous and it works great. I also had this other thing where you could like look on you could bring up your wrist in VR and you could see your Twitch chat. So you can like have a screen so you can actually see your socials or whatever's going on. Because one of the problems with streaming, of course, is like I want to be able to see the chat, you know, but I can't do that if I'm in a virtual world unless I have another screen to look at. And yet there's a thing where you can get it, you can like, it's like super sci-fi, which is pretty cool. But Stacey, I'll have to have you on just to chat sometime because we could just chat for hours as well, probably.
That'd be fun. I'd listen in.
Tell me about all your crazy summer experiences. So, any other questions before we wind down for the night? I think we covered a lot. You've covered a lot.
Good. I hope it was useful. If anybody does have any more questions, Scott, you know how to reach me. So Stacy does as well. I'm always happy to answer questions.
Awesome. And I appreciate you being here and taking your time. And everyone in chat, I appreciate you being here as well. And
for the East Coasters, it's late over there.
Yeah, it's only 10:30. We're us here on the East Coast like to stay up late.
Wow.
So, and I put the link in there for the VR set that Stacy was talking about. that she got. So I will look at
Yeah.
that later myself as well, since that's the kind of thing I
That's a
do.
good set.
So this is how I'll spend my summer,
There you go.
looking at different things. So fabulous. Thank you so much, everyone. And I'm going to say good night. And by the way, this is the last Connected Conversations show until I decide to pick it up again in the fall, which I'll do at least some episodes. I'm not sure exactly the format yet. Please stop in Friday night, which will be the next stream, where me and Vinny, my former student now, since school year's over, is going to coach me through playing Below Zero as we explore alien marine life. And I hope to see you then. So good night and be good.